You know, every human being faces challenge and pain and demands, but most of us do not respond quite as well. Most of us don't respond like Jesus did. We do get sarcastic and bitter and cold. Jesus lived in a kind of divine rhythm where grace was constantly flowing into him. And then from him, grace was constantly flowing out. Try to imagine having a life like that, grace always flowing into you and then grace always flowing out from you, living in what might be called a cycle of grace. Jesus was the master of living in that cycle of grace. A man by the name of Trevor Hudson has written about this, and even others before him have thought about it. This cycle of grace that Jesus lived in had four kind of stages to it. And the first stage was the stage of acceptance. And this one is very vivid when you think about it. Jesus was brought into the world by a mother who loved him. He's cared for by parents who give him protection and nurture from the beginning. Before he starts his ministry, he's baptized. When he comes up out of the water, a voice speaks from heaven, "You are my beloved Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." Now try to imagine hearing that voice. Greater words of acceptance have never been spoken, and none ever could match these 13 words from God. See, for Jesus, acceptance and identity came before ministry and achievement. This is key. It was key for him. It is key for us today. There exists a joy that no one can take away, and acceptance that just can't be earned, and acceptance that can only be received. There's kind of a practical example of how we can actually shy away from our acceptance in Christ. And it has to do with the choices that we face every day. Maybe you have noticed on any given day, there are like way too many choices that we all have to make. It starts with our having to decide, what clothes do I wear? Which ones will create the best possible impression given the people that I will see today? And then there's trivial stuff like food. What will I eat this morning, this afternoon, this evening when dinner time comes? What food will bring me the most pleasure? What do I feel like eating tonight? We eye our task list with a hefty dose of scrutiny. Which ones, once accomplished, will bring me the most success? Once I complete my task list, how then will I reward myself? There's a whole host of choices out there. What entertainment options will make me the happiest? Which ones will best scratch my itch? We weigh what events we need to attend, what vacation destination will bring us the most joy, which people are willing to disappoint by making choices they themselves would not make. Choices, choices, choices overwhelm us. I mean, have you been to the Cheesecake Factory lately? The enormous menu there is oppressive in and of itself. Too many choices. And it is our wills that grow weary with this stuff. Now, these categories of fatigue are difficult enough in and of themselves, but they combine to make us feel separated from God, separated from ourselves. They disintegrate our souls. We become distant from what we love most about creation and life. This is soul fatigue, plain and simple. The soul needs grace. And grace says, I will help you make the choice, and then you let it go. Don't overthink all the options. Pick something, be done. There is no one that you need to impress because you have already been accepted by God. The cycle of grace begins with acceptance. The next movement is what might be called sustenance or sustaining grace. If you read through the Bible, you get the sense that the soul was designed to run on God's grace. The Hebrew Scriptures, which might be thought of as the great soul book of human literature, especially the Psalms, are almost obsessed with this thought. A quick jog through the Psalms shows us that the soul thirsts for the Mighty One. It thirsts for him like parched land thirsts for water. Like a laser, it focuses the full intensity of its desire on him. The soul is said in the Bible to lift itself up to him. It blesses him. It is said to cling to him. It is said to wait for him in silence. Our mind might be obsessed with idols. Our wills may be enslaved to habits. Our body might be consumed with appetites. But our soul can only ever find its rest in God. And that's God's plan. In the beginning, when God made the world, he planted a garden in the east in Eden. Garden gets described at some length in the Bible. God made all kinds of trees to grow out of the ground, and they're said to be pleasing to the eye, many bearing fruit, sweet and good. He decorated the garden with flowers and put fish in the streams and birds in the sky. Eden was the perfect home. God created for his greatest creation, man and woman, Adam and Eve. God made the whole earth so that he would have a place to be with the man and the woman, with you and me. And that garden that God created represents God's great desire for being with. Now, for the soul to be well, for your soul to be well, it needs to be with God. It needs to rest in God. But how do we, ordinary people, living in our world, technology, economic challenges, moral debates, rapidly changing beliefs, how do you and I discover the with God life that we see way back in that garden? And by the way, that we see in the lives of the disciples, or in the Acts 2 church, or in the lives of so many godly women and men over the last 2,000 years. How do we live with God? This is what the soul needs. One day I had a meeting with my staff, and it lasted about an hour and a half. And when it was done, I realized that for the entire hour and a half, I had not once thought about or listened for God. And I work at a church. I had to drive someplace immediately following that, and I was kind of grousing in my spirit because I felt like I had too much to do and not enough time to get it done. You ever have that kind of thought? And I was feeling hurried and impatient and ill-tempered. And then this thought came to me. And as best as I can discern, I think God was behind it. John, the thought went, let's look at the next 2 hours. You have to go through these 2 hours of your life anyway, with me or without me. You can continue doing life without me. You can feel stressed, pressured, angry, sorry for yourself, impatient. You can generally be a pain in the neck to the people around you. You can do 2 hours that way. Or you can do those 2 hours with me. You can be glad you're alive. You can be joyful. You actually have work to do. You can recognize that I'm running the universe, not you. And I know what I'm doing. So you have a choice to make. You're going to do 2 hours anyway. You want to do them with me or without me? Now, when I look at life that way, it just doesn't make sense to say, God, I want to do it without you. God, the truth is, my soul needs you more than it needs my frustration and my impatience. See, the with God life is not a life primarily of more church activities or more devotional practices or trying harder to be good. It is a life of inward peace and contentment for my soul with my Maker and the manager of the universe. And right now, in this moment, wherever you're sitting, I'm talking to you. I can be aware right now. I'm actually not making up most of these words as I go along. I have a little teleprompter here. And I can be aware in this moment, God is with me. I don't do this by myself. And you, wherever you are, whoever you sit next to, you can be aware in this moment. It's a holy moment. God's with you. It is that simple, life with God. That is the good news that Jesus came to bring, that life in God's kingdom, God's presence, God's power is available. And that's what your soul needs. And without God, your soul will shrivel up and die. I watched a video not long ago of an interview that I did with Dallas one time. I've done, I don't know how many interviews with Dallas. And what struck me as I was watching at this particular time was how quickly I spoke and how slowly Dallas responded. You can tell by watching that Dallas is actually thinking before he speaks. And it's like there's a conversation that's always running between him and his Heavenly Father because he's so aware of God's presence. I look closely, and when Dallas finishes one sentence, there's often a period of silence before the next one begins. And I realize while I'm watching, one of the reasons it's kind of a challenge to interview Dallas is I never actually know if he's finished talking. He might be done with his response to the question, or he might be pausing to reload. I think I could probably ask him a single question and his answer might never end. And it's the same riding in a car with him or sharing a meal or listening to a conversation with a third person He never rushes a song or a walk or a prayer. And that's why it's so healing to be with him. And I wonder, is it healing to be with me? Is it a healing thing to be with you? The personification of a healing presence, of a soul at peace, of grace sustained. That's my friend Dallas. The third movement in the cycle of grace is significance. We were created to make a difference beyond ourselves. The soul needs this. Significance actually is connected to the little word sign. Our lives were meant to be signs that point beyond ourselves to God. That's why we're not just selves, we're souls. Now, here's the difficulty. We tend to think that what we do is what makes us significant beings. Dave is an accountant, Debbie's a singer, Joe's a general contractor, I'm a pastor in California. And of course, it's true, there's value in what we do and the contributions we make. But they don't make us significant. Jesus measured significance another way. And by his actions, Jesus communicated to people that significance is a gift, not an achievement. See, the soul leaks out its need to be considered significant. Not too long ago, my wife and I and a couple of our kids were sitting around our house, and one of my daughters said, "It's like Mom always used to say, there's a big difference between agreeing with somebody and understanding somebody. Big difference between giving somebody agreement and understanding." And all of a sudden, I felt something inside me. I said, no. That's not what Mom always used to say. That's what I always used to say. I went to grad school in psychology. I remember when I learned that. I sat for a couple of minutes, and then this kind of disturbing thought came to my mind. Why is it that I needed credit for being the one who said that in my family? And I lived with that for a minute, and then I realized it's because there was a fear inside me that because my wife is so verbal and speaks in such a free way, I'm afraid that I will be kind of a thin presence in the lives of my children. And they won't have as vivid or powerful memories of what it is that I say. And I felt so vulnerable and so kind of at risk when I became aware of that. But it's an amazing thing. When I said that to my family, I think the reason that I wanted credit for that saying is I'm afraid that I'm not present enough. Then my soul was able to be known. And then my soul was able to be loved. And then my soul was able to be healed. And I could remember one more time that my soul is not significant because of the clever things that I say or the oppressive things that I achieve. Significance is a gift of love. What Jesus understood about the cycle of grace is significance is always a gift. One time he'd sent his disciples out on a mission and they came back to report what they'd done. Now imagine being one of Jesus' closest followers, given the privilege of sharing his message. You just completed a big assignment, went well. You are so psyched about what your next mission is going to be. It's not like there isn't a lot of work to be done. But we're told that so many needy people came to Jesus, according to the Bible, he didn't have a chance to eat. So what assignment does he give to his followers? What he says is, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Instead of rushing off to the next big thing to do, Jesus got everybody into a boat, and they went off to what's called a solitary place. But what about the task saving the world? What about all the sick people that need to get healed? See, Jesus knew the power of a rested soul, and he wanted that gift to belong to his disciples. We seem sometimes to spend most of our lives trying to draw crowds and please crowds and impress crowds. Jesus seemed to spend so much of his time getting away from crowds. Because a rested soul is the secret to what Jesus called the easy yoke. Significance is the gift that gives a well-rested soul. And then beyond significance, there is a fourth and final movement in the cycle of grace, and that's achievement. Jesus makes this staggering claim in the Gospel of John. "I'm the vine, you're the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. but apart from me, you can do nothing. Now, bearing fruit means we will do wonderful things in our lives for God and his kingdom. But we will not do them because we have tried super hard. In fact, what we really have to learn to do primarily is learn, how do I live in grace with God each moment? That's what it means to abide in the vine, to live intimately with Jesus from one moment to the next. And if we don't do that, Jesus says, nothing much will come out of our little life and our little power. This is the cycle of grace. Now here's where it gets so interesting. The opposite of the cycle of grace is what Trevor calls the cycle of works. In this, I simply go backwards against the tide of grace. I begin by trying to achieve impressive accomplishments through my own strength for my own ego. I hope that by doing this, I might feel significant. And I hope that this sense of significance could sustain me through all the difficulties and stresses of life, so that ultimately I hope that the end result will be that somehow I will have been acceptable to somebody. That's the cycle of works. It's exactly the opposite of the cycle of grace. And it will destroy the soul. It is the heavy burden. It is the hard yoke. But when your soul is at rest, then the soul and the grace of God occupy the throne of your life. Then your will is undivided and obeys God with joy. Then your mind thinks thoughts of truth and beauty, and you desire what is wholesome and good, and your soul finally is at rest. In the Gospel of John, Jesus explains to his disciples the nature of the forever alive soul. He says it this way: a woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. So it is with you. Now is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. Here's what Jesus is saying. There is a time coming when death will not be in control, and you will live beyond this present suffering, and your joy will have its full way in you. It's an amazing claim. A woman giving birth to a child has pain. But when her baby is born, she forgets the pain. Really? You ever talk with a woman who's given birth? Forget the pain? Clearly, Jesus wasn't talking about my wife. When that beloved first child was born, Nancy and I went through childbearing classes. And interestingly enough, the word pain never got used. The instructors probably figured it'd be kind of a downer. So instead, they talked about discomfort. Husbands were to be coaches who would help ease discomfort. You know, the discomfort of pushing a bowling ball out of somebody's body. Nancy was in labor with that kid for 12 hours. And the baby was turned the wrong way, which kind of complicated things. The hardest part of the baby's skull was pressed against the most tender part of Nancy's spine. And this caused Nancy considerable discomfort. The nurse talked about the baby being sunny side up, which sounded cheery to me, but didn't seem so cheery to Nancy. For 11 hours, I massaged my wife's lower spine with a tennis ball. I encouraged her to breathe. I was bent over. My back was aching. My hands were sore. I never complained. She'll never know what I went through to have that baby. The worst moment came when the doctor reached inside my wife's body and physically wrenched the baby 180 degrees. Nancy let out a yell I will never forget. I was the coach. I had to do something. I asked, Nancy, are you experiencing some discomfort? She still actually remembers that. So while Nancy and probably every woman who's ever given birth can remember the pain, Jesus' point is that the joy of giving life to another human being outweighs the pain of giving birth. His point is that what starts in pain ends in joy. His point is, to paraphrase a line from a movie, there will be great pain and there will be great joy, but in the end, joy wins. So if joy has not yet won, it is not yet the end. The disciples still didn't fully understand, and to tell the truth, neither do we. But joy wins. That's the promise. We will see the goodness of God, and the world will be reborn. We will see the goodness of God, and pain will be defeated. We will see the goodness of God, and our souls will be healed. Jesus is saying we can be accepted now We can be sustained now, not just today, but tomorrow and every tomorrow after that. And then we can know significance, really. Then we can know achievement, real achievement, and not just now, but for all eternity. We will be forever alive. This is what the soul craves, your soul, my soul, every soul. This is grace. Grace for today, and grace for tomorrow, and grace for eternity.